Welcome to Sex Ed with DB. I'm your host, DB. Let's get into it. Abortion access is changing, and at the same time that safe, modern telehealth options emerge, politicians are passing harmful bans to block access and win votes, impacting marginalized and low-income communities the most. But there is hope, in the form of 5 pills. Plan C is a national nonprofit campaign on abortion pills, a safe and effective modern method used up to 12 weeks. At plancpills.org, you will find a 50-state guide to pills, which includes FAQs, in-depth resources, and free hotlines to understand legal risk and get medical support. Plan C's mission is to spread the word about this medically safe, modern method, and all the different routes of access, including activist telehealth providers and getting pills in advance. Because access to safe abortion care should not depend on your zip code. Visit plancpills.org to learn more and join the movement. And make sure to check out Plan C's merch store and use code SEXEDWITHDB for 10% off. All merch proceeds go to a rotating list of abortion support organizers. When you're traveling, you don't have access to your amazing sex goodie stash. So, you start to pack your lube for sexy time in your toiletry bag, and when you open your bag back up, the lube you packed, of course, spills all over your toothbrush, makeup, and floss picks. Enter a brand new product from Uberlube that will get your lube to your destination without spillage. They're new good-to-go travelers. Perfect for your purse, pocket, gym bag, or carry-on luggage, the Good-to-Go Traveler features the same Uberlube product in a discreet aluminum traveler that comes in 6 colors. Try Uberlube and their Good-to-Go Traveler now with code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at uberlube.com. Small business owners, freelancers, and contractors, listen up. If you're running a small business and you're making at least $60,000 in profit each year, you're going to love Collective. Collective is the all-in-one financial solution for self-employed people. They let you focus on your passion and not your paperwork. Collective handles all of the corporate formation and compliance paperwork, taxes, bookkeeping, accounting, and even payroll. Go to collective.com now and use code Danielle, DANIELLE, to receive 1 month free. And make sure to tell them that Sex Ed with DB sent you. In a world that constantly encourages you to change, it's bold to just be yourself. Sexual expression and satisfaction are different for everybody, so rather than conforming to others, focus on falling in love with who you are. Lion's Den sources the very best products to help you find what you like and help you feel confident expressing your sexual desires. You can get 15% off in-store and online using code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com to begin exploring everything about yourself. Follow them on social at lionsdenadult on Instagram and TikTok. Hello, amazing Sex Ed with DB listeners. DB here, obviously. I'm so glad to introduce Jamie and Shaba for this really, really wonderful episode. I just really clicked with them, and I'm so glad that they were able to come on. In this episode, I learned that Jamie and Shaba, a very cute couple, both have very large YouTube followings and both have PhDs. Very impressive. We talk about Jamie's trans journey and documenting it for the world to see, as well as Shaba's bisexuality journey and everything in between. We talked about a lot in this episode. We also talk about our favorite queer TV shows and how to combat trans misinformation. And I just really enjoyed our conversation. It felt very authentic and fluid and easy. They're super funny and very British, very cute. And I'm excited for you to hear it. But before we launch in, I just want to shout out our brand new merch line because I'm so proud of it. We worked with 20-some Design. And if you go to sexedwithdb.com/merch, you can see the mugs and the totes and the stickers and the hats and the shirts and all the fun stuff. So go to sexedwithdb.com/merch. And if you rate us 5 stars and leave us a review on this episode, you could win a sticker. Email us a screenshot of you doing so at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. And here I am with Jamie and Shaba. Hello, Jamie and Shaba. How's it going today?
Hey,
Hi.
it's good. How's it going your end?
Great. We have a gloomy California day out here, but I'm happy to meet you both and be here for the next hour, talking all about really fun stuff. So thank you for joining me.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
having
much for
us.
having us.
Of
When you say gloomy California day,
That doesn't go
I
together.
know,
doesn't
are
make
you coming
sense.
to the Brits for the
No.
sunshine? This is bad.
Yeah, I feel like if in the UK, if you're like it's a gloomy day, you're just like it's a Wednesday. That's just like the norm, right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, every day. Yeah.
Every day. Okay. Well, I'd love to get started. If you both can just share a little bit about yourselves and your background and kind of who you are.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Give us your life story, Jamie. Go for it.
You want me to go first? Okay. I volunteer. So my name is Jamie. I am a transgender man from the UK, and I make YouTube videos about my transition and breaking down transphobia and just humanizing the trans experience, really. And I have also written a book that's part memoir, part self-help guide for the trans community and for allies. And I have a PhD looking at trans people's well-being and development. So very transy stuff.
I'm
Yeah.
sensing a theme.
Very
There is a bit. There is a bit of a theme, yeah.
Yes. Hi, I'm Shaba. I am not trans. I'm cis, but I guess grew up with your journey alongside.
Yeah.
So I'm a fierce trans ally because the community absolutely needs help, and also because I love my husband.
Yeah, I hope you were a trans ally.
At this point, just imagine if this was a time where
This
she
would
was
be a
like,
bit
I
of
have
a
to tell her
revelation.
Pretty
something.
committed to the cause.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, no, we've been married for.
Just over a year.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm also terrible with dates.
Newlyweds.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Kind of.
exciting. That's,
Yeah.
I mean, happy anniversary? Question mark. I don't know when you got married, but that's just over a year.
End of
That's
September last year. So
Thank
yeah.
you.
Great.
Very kind.
That's
Yes.
awesome.
But we've also been together for 12 years. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Newlyweds, but also old married couple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Old souls.
Right.
Does that work?
You know each other quite well.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I am. I'm planning a wedding right now. My fiance and I are getting married next August, and we've been together for
Amazing.
thank you for like 7 years. So it is this kind of funny thing where we're like, we kind of already do all this stuff, but we just have to
Yeah.
like get the paperwork, get the flowers, etc. Whatever you're gonna do. So yeah, I tip my cap to anyone who's ever gotten married, even if they elope. It's like a lot of effort and a lot of planning. So yeah,
It
good.
is.
Yeah.
We were in very two minds about whether we should or not. Some part of us was just like, oh, it's like so traditional and sort of like old school. Is it something that we need to do? But I think ultimately we both had like our reasons for really wanting to.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yours was, oh, I mean, I don't want to speak for you.
Oh, well, I managed to change my birth certificate in the UK, so it felt very meaningful to be able to get married as like husband and wife, because we wouldn't have been able to legally do that if I hadn't changed my birth certificate. So it was like, when that happened, it was like, oh, this is actually like an exciting prospect now to get married.
Yeah. And then for me, it was sort of like, I guess I always, when you grow up and you sort of like expect to get married, and I guess like parents always give you these like ideas of walking down the aisle. For me, being Asian, that was like, oh, you're gonna go down the aisle in a little red lenga and we're gonna eat so much curry and dance so much sega. It's gonna be so much fun. And then when I got with Jamie, unfortunately my family were very unaccepting, so for the longest time I didn't think we would have that, but then when my mum in particular sort of came round and started to accept us as a couple and understand what being trans meant and what a relationship was, she was like, Shaba, I'd really love it if we can add some cultural aspects to the wedding. And so I was like, okay, that's it, we're getting married.
Totally. I mean that's really meaningful, and what an experience for you, and what a journey, for your mom and family, hopefully, to kind of be like, hey, like, we love you, we support you. And
Absolutely.
yeah, in a similar vein, my dad has been like, so you're getting married with like a rabbi, right? And I'm like, no, Dad, we're not getting married by a rabbi. Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'll give you like the bread and wine prayer. How about that? Like, how about you can be in charge of that? And that'll be like,
it's a negotiation.
like back and forth.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of a wild thing. But any hooser doozer, we're getting off topic, but I'm really glad that you're here again, and glad to hear a little bit about your story. But I would love to kind of focus in a little bit and talk about YouTube, because you both did not even when I said, like, who the heck are you? You didn't even really mention anything about YouTube. And
Sorry.
and that's who you both are, in a sense. You're YouTubers, right? I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but I assume that that's maybe part of your identity, because you have a lot of people who follow you on there. And so I would love to hear from each of you, like, how did you get started on YouTube? What did that look like? What inspired you to kind of create this content online? And specifically, Jamie, for you, like, about your transition, like, what was that like?
You're so right. We did a terrible job.
We do YouTube. We make videos. That is a thing. So for me, I started YouTube like just in my bedroom as a 17-year-old, thinking I really want to document this process of transitioning. And I'd also found YouTube to be invaluable for helping me feel supported and less alone in being a trans person. That I was like, if I could do that for one other person by making videos myself, that would be amazing. Plus, all the guys back then were in the States, and I was like, maybe I could give like a UK perspective on things, like on what to do, because I was so lost.
We had no idea.
I know.
Yeah.
So I started making videos just from intro, then like starting testosterone and documenting my personal transition. And then it was a couple years in, we started like working on stuff together.
Yeah.
We did like couple Q&As together. You really started helping like with the ideas, because it moved away from my personal transition and into more like, let's make helpful videos for trans people and allies to help people just learn more about the experience. So that's when you started like YouTube.
It was an interesting introduction. I loved what you were doing. I was so scared of the internet and the idea of YouTube. Like Jamie was like, holy, I was going to swear, but I can swear.
Please.
Jamie was like, holy shit, this video's got 100 views. And I was like, oh my God, you're famous. You got to take it off.
Yeah.
We got to move. We got to get out of here.
Yeah.
I was like, you don't know what you're putting out there. And,
you were really scared of it. You were like, I don't know if I like it kind of thing.
It was a very vulnerable thing for
it
you.
was
to
a very
sharing.
new thing as well back then.
I was scared for you because
Aw,
it's wonderful that to be able to help people, and that was like so incredible to see. And like the reality is, spoiler alert, we're still doing it now, and it's mostly fueled by how much we gain help from the community, but also how much the community say it's valuable. Like it's what fuels us to share our story in the way that we do. But not everybody is helpful or being helped. Some people are really hateful, and that's what I was a bit nervous about. But then when we were going through sort of like a darker patch because my family weren't so accepting, you said, why don't we talk about it in a video? And we don't even need to put it online.
I was like, we can just like talk about a couple of things that are happening. I've made videos in the past talking about things I'm struggling with, but not necessarily posted them because they felt a bit too personal. We could just do the same and see what it feels like, because it's kind of like a little bit like therapy, but nobody's talking back, but you just get to like share. So that's what we did.
It was very one step forward, two steps back with sort of like the situation with us as a couple. And so we do like occasional updates online, and it was really reassuring. It sounds kind of morbid when you say it like that, but it was quite nice to feel not alone. There were so many other people going through really similar things, and you build this sense of community online. So yeah, that's kind of how I started getting involved too. And before you knew it, we were drafting these really terrible skits where you were flinging packers around your head and we were talking about period pads in men's bathrooms.
The channel has gone through many different phases.
Many iterations.
Yes, absolutely. Some better than others.
I think it got to a point where there was only so much that we could share about your journey and our journey that was helpful. So now we sort of do different things online where we talk about LGBT plus things more generally on your channel. And then we've got this sort of secondary channel, which was lifestyle, but I've now sort of adopted it a bit more for storytelling and diversity as a person of colour and as a bi person of colour. So, yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like you mentioned before, it's so valuable to see the people on the other end be like, hey, you've like actually really impacted my life in like a serious way. I imagine that's kind of how like teachers and mentors and kind of other folks feel when they are able to kind of help or aid someone through something really challenging, or just like simply put a smile on their face, right? Like there's a lot of sadness in the world and a lot of like a very harsh reality that we live in, especially on the internet, right? Like there is so much hate, as you mentioned, so many trolls, so much sadness. And when you're able to kind of find a pocket of sunshine that makes you feel like happy and joyful, it's pretty invaluable, right? And so you both are that for so many people, which is really, really cool.
Well, look, if we can prance around in front of the camera and call it doing good, then we're on to a good
we'll
thing.
Keep on doing it.
That's great. Okay, so Jamie, you mentioned this, right? You've documented your own transition journey on YouTube for over a decade. And
Yes.
you wrote the book on it, literally. Is there kind of any advice or insights that you would like to share with maybe like your past self at 17, right? Or like other people who maybe at the beginning of their own journey, whatever age they are, who are considering maybe sharing it either with their family or publicly?
Oh, so with my past self, I would just say, like, just keep doing what you're doing because it worked out pretty okay. And it's just the message of like things can feel quite slow and like they're not moving, but they really will. And when things do start going, it really makes all that time waiting and all that patience you had to have worth it. In terms of like young trans people now thinking about coming out or sharing their story, it's just always about if it's what you want to do and you are in a safe environment to do so, then I think it is a good thing to talk about. But first and foremost, think about your current situation and make sure that it's, good for you to talk about it and be open.
We all want to have those support networks.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you don't necessarily know like how your family is going to react or how the public is going to react. And at the end of the day, like you finding your people to like really lean on, or kind of like whether that is people from afar, like people that you admire, that you're consuming their content, or like if there's kind of like, and that I think is what's cool about the cool part of the internet. I mean, there are many cool parts, but like
Totally agree with
people
you.
are able to find people even if they don't live near them. Like I'm thinking about, trans people from the South in America, right? Like maybe where they're not in an accepting area, if it's like a very religious part of where they live and that's just like not an option for them, then potentially they can go online and find a community where they can feel like themselves.
Oh, absolutely. There is 100% support out there. For some people it comes in different forms and different places. Like you said, not everybody finds it in their real life right now where they are, but it is there. And there are
in
people
real life, but not from the immediate circles that you'd necessarily assume or expect.
Exactly. But it is absolutely there. And there are people out there who will love you and accept you and support you. It's just about finding them, and you will find them.
Yeah, totally. And sometimes giving the right amount of time to the people who are not so accepting. Because I think about some people that we know who we thought would never ever be accepting and have done like complete 180s. It's just about giving them the space and carving that opportunity to accommodate a place where they want to listen.
Yeah, and it can be hard to be the person waiting, to be like, okay, like I'm just gonna continue to like be myself, and I hope that one day you can come to terms with that, But I think like also, there's like an elephant in the room, like about this. That sometimes there being a generational gap, right? And I don't think that we don't really articulate that much, because it's not necessarily like, oh, so clean cut, like, oh, our parents or people of our parents' age are the only ones that don't get it. That's definitely not true. But I do think that when things feel to someone like they're changing so rapidly when they were a certain way for many, many years, that can be very hard for them to wrap their head around, despite someone being on the receiving end of that, being like, no, like it's the time is now for you to really like show up for me. So it can be kind of this like battle in a sense of like what someone is ready to accept and what their experience is of reality, and then your kind of experience that you've been in your own body your whole life, right?
You're so right. Age is not an excuse. And one of the things that I like really struggled to come to terms with, it sounds so weird, but like when I was thinking about you and your journey, like the first person Jamie came out to was himself. Right? Like people forget that. Like you sat when you had your discovery in turmoil and distress and confusion before, like way longer than for a long time before you went and told other people. And so to other people, sometimes it comes as a shock to be like, oh wait, this massive thing is happening right now, and you want to do these steps. But it's like, well, because this person's been thinking about it often their entire life and has found the words more recently, but still have been like planning this
Yeah.
as they've gathered the balls to come and tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for some people of like a certain generation as well, whilst it's not an excuse, there can be a lot of unlearning that needs to happen.
For
Right.
sure.
It's that big process of like, we saw it with people in your family, like you could see the messages that they'd received their whole lives and how completely like alien and out of the blue and like so odd that, you know, this scenario was to them is something that they never even thought was a possibility. And that takes a lot of time to process for some people, and that is okay. And it's for people where it does take time to process, it's fine if you need to take your time, but just the important thing is to always remain respectful. I
Yeah.
think that's when it becomes really difficult, and it can be difficult to have that patience with the time. If it's toxic, then remove yourself from the situation and give someone their time, like independent of your input.
For sure. You
but
don't need to understand to be able to
Yeah.
respect someone.
Right.
yeah
Baseline, right? That's like
Yeah.
baseline expectation.
respect,
kind.
and then we'll go from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And like ultimately, when you're in a partnership that's really loving and you have a community, you rely on those people less to understand quicker. And you can kind of
Mhm.
allow them to like, hey, if you respect me and you're able to process, like you take your time because I'll be over here like living my life
Yeah.
and still feeling
Yeah.
confident in who I am.
That's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Shaba, on to you. So as someone who's part of a high profile LGBTQ couple with Jamie, you've been in a unique position to promote bi visibility. And I wonder if you can kind of share your thoughts on like the importance of representation for bi folks in your experience and any experiences or insights that you've gained along the way.
That's super interesting. And honestly, I feel a little bit embarrassed to talk about these things because I have been a bad bisexual.
No.
I need to.
That kind of seems like bad girl. Like I'm a bad girl, kind of like
You
a
bad
kind of bad bi.
No, I didn't
That
mean
did
that
sound-
with any kind of
That
innuendo.
did sound a little bit, yeah,
You know,
not
like,
quite
it's
how
because
you meant it.
I say it with like cringe, like I genuinely feel like so sad. But I'm fine. That's fine. Self-deprecating humor is a very British thing. It's good. No, I say that because I met Jamie before Jamie was Jamie, right? Like we were friends before you
Pre-transition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you were going through your journey, I didn't really think about my journey because my conservative upbringing meant that I just didn't have those questions during my coming of age. Like it wasn't a thing. You're brown, you're Muslim. My entire life was planned out. You're a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. That's like the amount of choice that I had in my life, right? I'm not to say that all Asian families are like that. That's just my
Your experience.
background. Yeah. So when I sort of did come to terms with who I was and go through that sort of like, oh, well, what's my identity? What's my exploration? And I realized that I was bi. I quickly realized because we were online and talking about being together, that being not straight was something that fueled the people in my life who were not accepting of Jamie to justify a relationship in a way that invalidated him. Does that make sense? Like when my family first realized that we were together, they were like, oh my God, Shaba's a lesbian? What do we do? Because they just didn't see Jamie as a man. And so they assumed that we were in a same-gender relationship. And there's nothing wrong with being in a same-gender relationship, but obviously in this context where it's not right, saying that really hurt me because it hurt Jamie because they weren't seeing you for who you truly are. So when I realized I was bi, and I was like, God, I feel like this is something I should tell my parents. I don't know why coming out is such a big deal, but it felt like such a big deal. I was like, Mom, we're going to have this conversation. I knew that one of the first things that she was going to say was, oh, well, now it makes sense as to why you're with a trans guy, right? And like use that as a way to invalidate Jamie being a man. So I kind of didn't speak about it for too long, which is what makes me a bad bisexual.
But you can see where it comes from. Like you spent a long time pushing back against your family, going, we are not a lesbian couple, Jamie is a man.
Yes.
Like, and we spent a lot of time online with people calling us a lesbian couple and calling you a lesbian, and you were like, no, I'm straight, I'm with a man.
Honestly, like I
Yeah.
think like I really kidded myself as well. Sometimes I look at things and I'm like, Jesus, I am
How
so
did you
thirsty
not
all the time.
know?
How did I not know? Right?
I don't know how I didn't figure it out, because yes, but
not sorry. I was just I'm using comedic effect by people are not thirsty all the time. But
you are a particularly thirsty guy.
Thank you,
know.
thank you, oh kind husband of mine. So yeah, I think one of the biggest insights that I would like to share and talk about now is like, just be yourself, and it's totally fine to be yourself. I think with bi people in particular, there is this need to put people in boxes, and the bi community are constantly saying, but look, there can be multiple boxes, it's okay, but it's you're not bi enough if you're married to a guy, you're, I don't know, like bi to the point where you're invalidating other people's identities. If you're with a trans person, there's nothing that you can really do apart from just being yourself.
I really relate, as also, a baby bi here, and someone who's like engaged to a cis man, right? I'm just kind of like wanting to talk about it, but people are like, but you're with a guy, just like the follow-ups. I'm kind of like, forget it. I don't even want to like get into it. And I think personally that like in a few years from now, this is very clear to me that younger generations are really, depending on where you are, right? Of course, but specifically in America, at least Gen Z is like very much embracing the like gender and sexuality spectrum like as it is without having to question it. And I think that which is awesome, right? And like should have been the norm the whole time, to like really allow there to be like multiple truths at once for people. And I personally think that in 20, 30 years, these conversations will kind of be seen as like, oh, that's so silly that we have been like so obsessive over, over these ideas and so nervous about talking about them with people because they're going to be so much more commonplace. And I'm just, and that's because there's been so much groundwork that has been done, like specifically by like Black trans women who have like
Absolutely.
been able to allow for people to talk about this. And at the same time, I just think it's like my own hangups around knowing that I am bi and knowing also that I'm like, depending on the circumstance, like embarrassed to talk about it based on whatever questions are going to come up. I'm excited for the moment where that will genuinely no longer be my feeling or any of our feelings, specifically for those who identify as bisexual.
I love that, and I totally appreciate as well that like it's not a linear journey. Sometimes you can feel like so badass in owning your identity, and other times you're like, oh no, wait, I'm totally an imposter. Totally. And I think what doesn't help is the bicycle in particular makes you feel that way. It's, like there's no one way of being bi, and the spectrum within being bi, for people who don't know about the bicycle, it can really increase imposter syndrome if you don't quite understand what's going on. It's actually one of the biggest comments that I have is from other women who are like, hey, I'm bi and in a different gender relationship. Like, am I bi? Like, tell me I'm bi. And it's funny because look, we're entitled to feel that way, of course, but sexuality, our relationship with our sexuality is our own. Yes, it defines and can describe our relationships in relation to other people. I just used the word relation in 3 different contexts there. That was really bad. But it is us first and foremost. It's not who we're with. I'm bi if I'm with Jamie. I'm bi if I'm not with Jamie. It's the opportunities and the discrimination, but also the culture that I deserve to experience goes far beyond the person that I happen to be with at that moment in time. And it's about being able to embrace that, right?
Totally. Completely agree. Back to you, Jamie. I'd love to talk a little bit about your fucking PhD. You kind of casually dropped that. Didn't think that we were going to come back to that, did you? In psych, with your dissertation focused on the topic of being trans. Could you share your experience while conducting this research and maybe like any specific areas or aspects that you were studying? And if you can share any kind of key findings or insights that emerged from your research, that would be awesome.
Sure. I mean, I may have casually said it, but Shaba didn't talk about hers at all. So just saying, I'm not the only. I'm
No,
not
we
the
don't
only
need to
one
go
in the
into
room.
this.
Oh my
The
god.
question is you now,
Yes,
Jamie.
I just wanted to address that.
No, I
Give
really
you a little
appreciate
shout
that.
out.
We definitely will have a
You're
follow-up
very
for you,
mean.
Shaba, so be
Don't
prepared.
be silly.
If I have to talk about mine, you have to talk about yours.
Well, go on, talk about yours.
Okay, so I did a PhD in psychology, and my aim was to kind of add some positive research that actually like looked at trans people's lives, because this was, how long ago did I start my PhD? Like 6 or 7 years ago. It was
Yes.
quite a while, and
Wow.
I felt like there was a very limited amount of actual research that cared about trans people's lives. And I was like, naive undergraduate student, like, yeah, I'm gonna go make a difference.
I'm going to change the world.
Uh-huh.
Woohoo! One
You
piece of
need that
research at a
energy,
time.
right, to even get you
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Oh, it was gone by the time I was writing my dissertation. I was like, why? But I started it because I wanted to look at the development of trans people from childhood into adulthood. I also wanted to look at influences and impacts on well-being. And then my supervisor, who ran a sexual orientation lab, kind of introduced me to a new topic of study that I could do that was into the physiological like arousal patterns of transgender men compared to cisgender people, and to see if there was a difference based on, is it like your kind of your body and your genitals that impacts this difference that we see? I'm doing a terrible job, aren't I? Or can gender have an impact there? The easier ones to explain, I basically found that trans people typically are quite like conforming for their gender identity from really early childhood. You don't have to be in order to be like trans enough or anything, because there's no such thing. But we did typically find that trans men were really like masculine in childhood, and that kind of carried on because of this want to like fit in and be seen as who they are. In terms of well-being, we found that trans people had higher rates of depression and anxiety, and things like being able to transition both socially and medically increased their well-being. So please, access to healthcare, let's go. And then do you
Seems
remember
silly.
my arousal
Yes,
element?
I do.
Do you want to help me out here?
Absolutely no, you're doing a great job. But I was just saying, like, it sounds silly, doesn't it, that you have to feel that you need to back up what seems like such obvious truths with statistics, but that's why
Totally.
research is powerful, right? Because it validates this stuff.
It makes people
Who
listen.
knew
Yeah.
Yeah.
trans people would be happier if we actually let them be trans?
It's because there's so many
Right.
people saying the opposite, and when you can like slap some research on the desk and be like, but like what's backing up your claim? And they're like, oh well, I know. And you're like, yeah, but I really know.
Right.
So it
I know
helps.
better than you, actually.
Yeah, I know scientifically.
Right.
Yeah, well, it brings it away from just the I know, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, well, actually, look, the world tells us. You can't argue with fact, which I think lots of people try and do these days.
Unfortunately, people do, but
They
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no, exactly. You didn't tell DB. You want me to do the.
Yeah,
Okay,
you
right.
helped a lot with it, so
I'll try. Correct me if I'm
Uh-huh.
wrong. So, Jamie worked in a sex lab, which is a great conversation starter, by the way.
oh no,
Very
we would go
fun.
to pride events and be like, hey, do you want to watch porn for money?
In the name of science.
In the name of science.
oh my god, how could
Yeah.
anyone say no?
There were two types of people in the world, right? Some people were like, yeah, sign me up. And other people were like, get away from me.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was, I think it was a really cool study. So
Mm.
essentially, and we have to realize this is like genital arousal, not through just what we identify as. If you say that you're bi, you're bi. If you say that you're straight, we're not trying to say that you're not straight. But genitally, the response between cis men and cis women differ when we look at porn. So regardless of your sexual orientation, cis women,
A
will
majority of,
will typically get aroused by watching both men and women in porn, whereas cis men,
Mhm.
would typically only get aroused by the gender they are attracted to. Does
Huh.
that make sense?
Yeah.
So, essentially, the clickbaity headlines there is that all cis women are bisexual, which is not true. But the genital response is that they respond to both.
Yeah.
So Jamie was like, hey, well, what about trans men? Do they conform more to the sex they're assigned at birth, or more to the gender they identify in sort of innately? So you looked at trans men and
Yeah.
where they like, do they sit more in line with cis men or cis women, and found ultimately that, like cis men,
Mhm.
they more get that genital arousal response to the gender they are attracted to, which I think is really freaking cool,
Yeah,
right?
it's called category specific arousal. So like we found that both trans men and cis men showed a category specific, whereas cis women show category non-specific.
Because what that
And,
shows is that trans men are innately like cis men. So how can you say that this stuff is like made up and, you know, not biological when there are so many patterns?
And they were using the same, a majority of the trans men were using the same genital measurement device as the cis women. So it wasn't down to like device differences. So the kind of concept behind that was that there seems to be a gender element to influences on a physiological response. So we were like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
I'm sorry, DB. I'm hoping your eyes aren't like glazing over. We're
Not
totally
at all.
I'm
I'm thinking about like all the different ways. In fact, well, I have a master's of public health, and so I'm very
amazing.
Listen, I don't have a PhD. Okay, clearly I'm in PhD land here, but I'm really fascinated by that research because number one, there's not enough research in like sexuality and sexual health. Period. I feel, or if there is, it's mostly towards cis men and like erectile dysfunction. So that's number one. Number two, I just feel like any sort of research that shows these ideas and kind of further proves, like we said before, like we don't really need research to tell people that like trans people and just people in general should just be whoever the hell they want to be and however they want to be. But when we do, I do think it opens up this other conversation for people who don't quite understand why they have the ideas that they have, when they kind of can see that like, hey, don't you think that this is interesting? Like, what do you think about this? I think that it's an open door, which I think is like a really, really awesome thing. And you like, you know, to have a PhD where you're like mainly studying transgender health history issues, like that is a really, that's probably more than most people in their lives will ever study transness, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I've read a lot of papers.
With the lived experience too, I'd say you're
with
quite
the
the
lived
experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, I'm into it. And Shaba, I mean, please, what is your PhD
Oh
in?
my gosh. No, I mean, it's not really relevant to this conversation. My PhD is in psychology and computer science. And to cut very long story short, I looked at a concept called parasocial relationships.
Where you feel like you know
which,
somebody when you don't know them.
Right. So, like, I mean, as creators, YouTubers, we talk a lot, and I feel like a lot of people form relationships with us where we don't necessarily know the community beyond the community as a whole. So I was just really fascinated into sort of like where they sit in our social networks and if we can use social media in that way for social good. Parasocial relationships are more than just social media. Like, I can't tell you the number of people who have parasocial relationships with Winnie the Pooh or Princess Diana
Homer
or Homer Simpson, right?
Oh, wow.
But it is true that the research that we did sort of tried to understand the effects on our well-being and on our emotions and our emotional fulfillment, which is really cool to see that actually parasocial relationships help us in really significant ways. So just like we go to our in-person ties if we're sad and we need to feel happy, watching a parasocial relationship, immersing ourselves in those relationships can also do that too. That's not to say that we are wanting to substitute all of our real life relationships for parasocial relationships. But just as you said, you know, if there are people out there in the world who are young and LGBT and living in a really conservative place and they don't have the people on their doorstep that they can sort of relate to, it's great to know that actually the people that they're forming connections with online can also genuinely positively help them, which is really cool.
And you said your research wasn't relevant
This
to the
is
conversation.
this is
so relevant.
I have so many thoughts. I mean, like,
yeah.
First of all, we're on a podcast, for God's sakes. I mean, people listening, like, I don't know them.
You're right. Like the DB parasocial relationship is
like
real.
People listening, like, I have a job because of you. Like, do you understand that? Like, this is it is reciprocal, you know? Like, I do think it's interesting too, like thinking about really big celebrities, right? And how many, like the Kardashians, right? Like, combined, they have probably like 1 billion followers on the internet, all of them, the Kardashian Jenners. And people don't actually know who they are, even though they post all that they can post, right? Everything that they want to post on the internet. And that to me is really fascinating. Like, people gain a lot from just like consuming their content, some good, some bad. But I really think that I would love to have a separate conversation about that, because I do think it's very interesting. And you also have the lived experience of being a YouTuber and having a ton of subscribers and people having that relationship to you. So both of you are like, I'm going to like live my life, and then I'm going to study aspects of my life. And, like,
So
really
research what you know.
Well, no, it's also because like it can help, right? So like, yes, as you said, like the Kardashians, huge following, but also like despite this, people don't really sit and think, oh well, how do the Kardashians actually affect me in my life? You know, when Princess Diana died, people were sad, and they're like, I'm weird for being sad because I'm grieving over someone I don't know. But you're not weird. Everybody does it. And it's not just in matters of like emotion ships, which is the term that's used in the psychological field. It's also things like prejudice. We were doing studies where we found that listening to people, not like Jamie, I didn't want to use Jamie because I felt that was like a little bit too close to home. But I was working with these creators who are amazing and talking about their experience with mental health, and people who had huge stigmas towards mental health actually found that their stigma, the prejudice that they had towards people like Maddie, who was the creator I was using in that instance, was reduced over a longer period of time, like over the course of many weeks, like multiple months, I think in some cases, but just by hearing the story of someone that is different to their own. So being exposed to stories about prejudice, about prejudicial issues reduces people's prejudice. And that is such a powerful thing, to know that we can do that on a long-term scale. Like we can totally use this to help reduce things like transphobia, homophobia, all the phobias.
I'm about to get personal here, so listen up. I'm going to tell you a fun fact about me that you definitely didn't know. The lube that I use most consistently is Uberlube. I really mean it. If you were here with me right now, I'd tell you to go over to my nightstand drawer and tell me what you see. That's right, you would see a bottle of Uberlube. If you've never heard of Uberlube, let me tell you about it. Uberlube is a silky smooth silicone-based lube recommended by leading doctors, and its body-friendly ingredient list makes it widely used by people with sensitivities to lubricants. Another amazing thing about Uberlube is that it doesn't leave a sticky residue like water-based lubes do. It lasts for a long time and doesn't stain clothing or bedding. I have 3 bottles of Uberlube on my bedside table right now, ready when I need it. If you're someone who wants to feel more pleasure in the bedroom, use code SEXEDWITHDB for 15% off at Uberlube.com. Trust me, it's amazing. Small business owners, freelancers, and contractors, listen up. If you're running a small business and you're making at least $60,000 in profit each year, you're going to love Collective. Collective is the all-in-one financial solution for self-employed people. They let you focus on your passion and not your paperwork. Collective handles all of the corporate formation and compliance paperwork, taxes, bookkeeping, accounting, and even payroll. Go to collective.com now and use code Danielle, DANIELLE, to receive 1 month free. And make sure to tell them that Sex Ed with DB sent you. Magic Wand's story begins in 1968, a full year before we landed on the moon and about 6 months before bell-bottoms were trendy the first time. This is when the Magic Wand, the original personal massager, was first introduced, and I am so glad it was. No one expected that this unassuming device would soon become one of the world's most recognizable products. The Magic Wand Original exemplifies the phrase icon, and now it shares the spotlight with 3 equally impressive models: Magic Wand Plus, a corded variable speed massager, Magic Wand Rechargeable, a cordless multifunction device, and the first ever Magic Wand Mini, a new, compact, adorable, rechargeable massager. Every product that bears the Magic Wand name features the legendary power and historic pleasure that took the world by storm more than half a century ago. My personal favorite Magic Wand is the original. They sell millions every year, and for good reason. It's powerful and brings so much pleasure in all the right places. Want to get a discount on this amazing powerhouse? Go to sexedwithdb.com/magicwand to learn more. Let me tell you about one of my favorite pleasure product retailers out there, Lion's Den. If you haven't heard about Lion's Den before, I can't wait to tell you about them. Lion's Den opened its first retail facility in Columbus, Ohio in 1971. That's right, over 50 years ago. Since then, they've grown to more than 50 outlets throughout the US. building their reputation on high-quality products, low prices, and a knowledgeable sales staff who can help you find the perfect toy. One of the many things I love about Lion's Den is that they advocate for a sex-positive perspective on intimacy and sexual well-being, and strive to break the stereotypes and stigma surrounding sex by providing comprehensive educational resources to empower everyone to enjoy life to the fullest. They are simply amazing. Lucky for you, Lion's Den is giving my listeners an exclusive discount of 15% off your purchase, in-store and online with code SEXEDWITHDB at lionsden.com. What are you waiting for? Get your amazing Lion's Den toy now. You're actually transitioning into, no pun intended, the perfect segue here, which is I want to talk a little bit about transphobic misinformation, because I think specifically with you two, you know, yes, being PhDs, we get it. You're cool, you're smart, you're fun, and you have a very large following on the internet, right? So like you both are like very attuned to what's going on online, more so I think than other folks. And so I'm wondering if you two can talk about what you think is behind the increase in transphobic misinformation that we've seen online in recent years. And I'm a big kind of action-oriented person. I don't really like talking about sad stuff if I don't have some sort of way to talk about how to combat it. So
Sure.
on the back of, you know, life's too short. We got to take action. And I wonder, like, what strategies do you think that everyday allies can use to kind of counteract these very harmful trends?
Oh. Okay, first bit. Increase in transphobia. I personally think it's kind of started developing quite slowly. It's been quite like an insidious build-up with some high-profile people dipping their toe into transphobia, seeing what the response is like, getting a relative amount of support, and then that level of transphobia just growing and getting louder and more confident, and more people kind of joining in and being like, oh, well, this person I look up to is saying it. This person that I trust because they're in this powerful position is saying these things. So I don't know anything other than what they're telling me, and I'm going to go along with that. And what we're seeing is, I do believe it's still a minority based on the even recent statistics that show most people are at least neutral to supportive of the trans community. But we have this very loud minority that have a certain level of power who are like, transphobia. And so it feels like there's a lot going on. But
you're saying it's a small amount of people that are just shouting really loud.
Yes, exactly. That was much more concise
than
what I said. In terms of like combating it, what I always say is like, listen to trans people. Like, why is it that people, mostly a lot of people's information, they would only ever heard about trans people from cis people, and that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not gonna base my entire opinion on a community of people on what somebody who is not from that community has told me, especially if it's like coming in quite like a negative tone. I'm going to go to the source and actually learn for myself. And I think that is the best way that we can combat this, is speak to the trans community, listen to the trans community, give trans people a platform to actually share the truth of their journeys, their stories, their experiences. And I think we will see this transphobia getting broken down as trans people are humanized more and just more visible.
You're so right. I think like that's what baffles me the most, right? I think there's always going to be hateful people in the world. And DB, like what you said was so interesting beforehand, you know, like, oh, you two have a following. There's a lot of people. You're so well clued in, you know. Just because people have a large following doesn't necessarily mean that they know what they're talking about. And like, I'm not going to be the first person to, you know, like say, oh yeah, I know everything, listen to me. Like, I encourage everybody to fact check everything, because we all live life with our own personal biases, right? And unfortunately, some people with really large platforms, as you said, are using those to share things that they don't really know too much about. They're not fact checking. And you know, like in the age as well of like Twitter, where people are encouraged to consolidate huge, complex human thoughts into 140 characters, it makes it difficult to fact check. And then, on top of that, we add a sprinkle of capitalism where people can, make titles super attention grabbing because, that makes money. People are not going to do things that are right. Yeah. It's not necessarily, the right thing. But we're not equipped as people to deal with the exposure to all of this information. And it feels like it's a different flavor in the air of hatred that's happening now. But you're right, it's because it's being platformed and allowed to be platformed based on what numbers. Like, you would never see people go on television on the UK national talk show and be like, hey, white person, tell me your thoughts about how brown people live. You just don't see that. Yet for some reason, people who are totally unqualified and totally removed and separated from the trans experience are being brought to share very negative and bigoted views, and then have the audacity to say, and we're being silenced. It's
the double whammy.
It is. I mean, the hopeful message from that, because I think there is one. I think the reason why we're seeing this different flavor and this increased volume in this hatred is because we were seeing, up until like a few years ago, a progression in trans rights. We were seeing more representation, more positivity around the trans community, and I think that scared some people. And we are now seeing this like stronger pushback against a community that used to be a lot more silent and a lot more hidden. And people were getting fearful that this community wasn't hidden and silent anymore.
Because
and
it's being used as a political divide.
Yeah, and I do genuinely believe like we're going to come out the other side of this and see all these people who are being horribly transphobic as just like, wow, that was a ride. Can you believe people used to say that?
Exactly what I said before, right? Of like, 20 years from now, we're just going to be like, oh, God, like, I can't believe we had to deal with this. And like, specifically, trans people had to deal with this. And
at the same time, it's not that unsurprising, too, because the same thing that people are saying now about trans people, like trans women, quote unquote, trans women are dangerous. They shouldn't be allowed in our toilets. The exact same argument was used about gay women.
Right.
Not too long ago. The exact same argument was used against people of colour, women of colour.
Yeah.
It's just the same recycled.
It's always like it's the easiest outgroup to pick on for the time period.
It's the less known, right? Yeah. Which is therefore the most scary to the majority. But I guess as you said, right, that the happiness that can be taken from that, which sounds like a weird sentence, but is that, and I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist anymore, or homophobia doesn't exist, but there is a time where people do learn, and we have to have these difficult conversations to get the exposure out there to make things better.
Yeah.
And I think the more and more conversations happen about it, the more and more that trans people are on platforms where they're able to just share their story and be themselves, the more and more accepting that people are. Hopefully.
So thanks, DB.
Hey, that wasn't really a thing for myself, but just generally speaking, I do think, and like the more and more trans people are elected as politicians and elected officials, and the more and more that we just basically allow for better representation, especially for trans people in positions of power, right? Like really that does have an impact on the way in which that people view that. For that reason, point for the internet. I think that is kind of cool, right? I'm also wondering if we can talk a little bit about how trans representation in mainstream media looks right now, because I think I studied film and media for my undergrad degree, and amazing. I am just like forever obsessed with TV shows and movies, and just like the way in which that these forms of media can have a huge impact on young people, especially when they're kind of growing up and viewing like who is the main character and what is their story. So I wonder if you have any like favorites out there, or any kind of other media that you think that portray trans and queer experiences really, really well.
I think there's definitely been some like real recent gems that have trans representation, both like passive in terms of just having trans actors or trans people kind of just present in this storyline, but not necessarily like, hey, here's a trans person.
Characters that are known for other things that just happen to be trans.
The passive representation. but we have really great shows like Heartstopper and Sex Education in the UK that like really highlight
Love
a lot
both
of
of them.
elements.
Oh, they're
Like,
amazing, aren't they?
Like
So
the
good.
trans experience, and we see like not just a token trans person as well, particularly in Sex Education, the new season. Like we see a range of experiences, and we see them as more than just their transness, as well as the difficulties and but also the joy that they experience as trans people, and that's fantastic. So they're like two of my faves.
Yeah,
Do you have anything?
I love them too. No, you're right. Well, I guess like alongside those shows, which totally stand out for me, it's also seeing it in books. I've been really into reading. Reading at the moment. And
I'm really into reading.
I'm really into books. No, I've just been reading a lot at the moment, and it's so cool to see the different ways in which storytelling can be so powerful. And like you, I love that passive representation. Isn't it so cool to see? I mean, again, I know this is like real life, but I just think about our friend Noah, who's a kick-ass musician, amazing, very creative, talented, almost sickeningly so being, who just happens to be trans. Isn't that like just such an amazing thing to be able to show that these platforms can exist and these stories can be told, and that being trans doesn't have to be the main part of it?
Yeah, it doesn't all have to come back to the fact somebody's trans, because we saw that in like the Barbie movie.
Yeah.
And then we were watching, what was it, Evil Dead Rise? And then afterwards we found out one of the actors was trans, and we were just like, oh,
Hey,
that's so
cool.
cool. Because like in neither movie was it mentioned at all. It's just like, great, we have trans people being visible, being present, being represented, but not just for being trans. And I think that's fantastic.
Totally. Yeah. Heartstopper in particular, I like
Hi.
saw the first season. I saw the first season on a plane. And I was like, I cannot stop. I just like it made me like butterfly sick to my stomach. Like I'm just like, oh my god, this is so sweet. I'm gonna get a cavity. Like it's just like
it's the show you wish you had, right?
Yeah. Oh my god, it was just like very adorable. And yeah, I've been, as a sex educator, I've been a huge fan of Sex Education from the very beginning, but agree that like in the most recent season, they're very unapologetic about trans storylines and about queer storylines. And at the end of the day, right, like Otis is like a cis straight male character. He's the hero of our story, but there's so much room specifically in the last season for other people's stories and for it not to center specifically to like only trans people feeling sad or depressed or just like not in a good place, right? Like trans joy and just like seeing that from trans people and trans people of color is pretty unique for such a popular Netflix show.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And so I'm definitely going to miss that show. I'm very bummed that it's over.
Yeah.
I agree with you, and I was so upset. But then Laurie Nunn, who, again, incredible talent, who made the show, I mean, why are people so amazing? She was talking about how these characters came to a natural end, and what she really wanted to do was allow space now for more shows to provide more universes and storylines that, in a similar vein, provide that representation. I was like, oh, stop being so good.
I know. That's awesome. I'm excited to see what else comes out.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what comes.
Yeah. Well, we only have a couple questions. This has been really fantastic. It's been really, really wonderful getting to know you. And before we started, I also mentioned our producer and editor and communications coordinator, Sadie, is a really big fan of you two. So just in the middle of this, before we even, get to the end, I would just want to say thank you to Sadie for recommending you two and just a shout out to her.
Thank you,
Thank
Sadie.
you.
Thank
Hi,
you for your
Sadie.
support.
If you each have maybe like a story or an example of maybe how your content has positively affected somebody or helped them understand trans or bi issues or content, I would love to hear what that has been like. Anything memorable?
Do you have anything you want to go for?
I know exactly what you're going to say, so you should just go for it.
I have a new one.
Are you going to say grandma?
What? I have a
It's
new.
always grandmas.
Who's grandma?
Who is
Anyone's
grandma?
I have a new one. Okay, the grandma thing is because
I can take the grandmas because the grandma's
such
cute.
a
If you've got a
sweet.
different
You
one.
take the grandmas then. Do you want to take the grandmas first?
Yeah, sure.
Go.
So this probably sounds so weird to me. I'm so sorry. Basically, it's always when we go to Asda as well. I don't know, in person, like there's this one specific supermarket in the UK where grandmas just seem to like really resonate with our story. But grandmas are the cutest beings on earth because they message on videos, and I swear grandmas are 90% the reason we do what we do, because they're so cute and they're like, hey, I didn't get it. And you know, like in like a typical grandma way, they're like,
Right.
for God's sakes, you millennials and your labels and blah, 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 blah. And they're like, but now I have a trans kid, or I have a bi kid, or I'm an Asian grandma.
Grandchild.
Oh, yeah, sorry, grandchild, typically grandchild. And they're like, and watching you, like, I get it now. Like, it's fine. And it's so cool to see you, like, win, and you're married, and you've got cats and a house, and you're just, like, a bit normal, you know? And it's just so sweet to get grandmas just being so kind, because you just know that they're being kick-ass supportive loved ones for their, you know, LGBT plus person in their life.
Yeah.
So that's why I just said grandmas, because I love grandmas.
Good for you. My new one, I actually got a recent comment that I love. It meant a lot to me. It's somebody saying that their mum bought my book and they'd been quite unaccepting, but they were like trying, and they read my book and that really helped them accept it, and it's like completely changed their interactions and the relationship. And I was like, I feel very overwhelmed. I can't, like, it feels very big-headed to repeat it, because like I can't, I'm like, I don't accept that something I did made such a big difference, but thank you so much for telling me. But like, I
That's
screenshot
the British
it.
thing, huh?
Yeah, I'm very British, and I was like, I'm just gonna have a look at that whenever I feel like low about what I'm doing or sharing things online, and like just as a reminder. That and grandmas.
Sometimes
And
in
grandma.
this industry, yeah, there's just like so much emphasis on things like stats and growth and numbers. Like, it's really nice to connect with people, to remember why you do what you do, and to see like the people behind the numbers. You know, people are amazing, and as you said, DB, none of us would be here if it wasn't for our incredible communities.
Totally.
We get, I can't speak for you, but like for me, I get so much from the community. They're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'm like, no, thank you. Like, you don't realize how important this community is for me. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I get a huge kick not only out of like helping people who like kind of show up in our DMs, but also like other up and coming sex educators. You know, I have like a workshop that I do like, you know, once a year basically, that's all about like how to make a living being a sex educator. And it's so cool connecting with other people who want to do this work full time, because like the more sex educators, the better. And it's just a really, really fun, unique thing to be like, hey, I want to help you like make money doing what you love to do. And what you love to do is also helping people. Like, being a sex educator is really helping people if you are, you know, medically accurate, science backed, comprehensive. You get it. Yeah. Well, we're kind of towards the end of our interview here. I would love to know if there are any like final thoughts or messages that you want to share with our listeners, especially maybe those who may want to kind of share their own trans or otherwise queer identity journey, or seeking to support someone who is.
I would say specifically to your little baby LGBT plus people who might be listening, support is out there, my loves. There is support out there. You deserve to be unconditionally accepted as who you are by everybody. I think for the longest time, I always felt that life would end if I didn't have the support from the people that I really needed to. But you are amazing and you are valid. And there are people in this world who absolutely know that. So you just need to connect with them. That'd be mine.
I can't top that.
No,
that was good. I'll say that was good.
I think that's amazing. What am I meant to say after that? You could have told me it was going to be really good, and then I could have gone first, and we could have wrapped up on your comment.
This is the only fight that they ever have, guys. It's just like them.
We argue all the time.
Amazing. No, I'm just kidding.
How dare you do a better job? I think I would just say my point again about like, if you want to share it, that is like an amazing gift to put out there, and it will also be something that can help you as well. Like, you can build a fantastic community, but just like think about what it means for your life, and just do it when you are in like the right place in your life to do so. But it can be a fantastic thing.
Love it. And where can folks find you? Want to share your, your PhD handles, your YouTube handles?
Well, I'm Jamie Dodger, or just Jamie Rains, kind of everywhere you'll find me.
I'm
at
sure
various places.
on all platforms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what about you, DB? Do you have a leaving parting message?
Oh, wow. Switcheroo on the interview. I just think like for trans folks specifically out there, like young trans folks or any age really, like young in your journey of being trans, I will say, however old you are, like Shaba said, like know that you fucking rock and like whatever you want to do in your life, like you can do and you deserve to have dreams and like succeed and laugh and love and have great sex and all of those things, have pleasure.
Yes.
And I think that is something that should be a mantra to like repeat over and over again until you believe it, if you're having a hard time believing it. But it's really for anyone. This advice is good for anyone listening. But I do think that since this is kind of like a queer specific episode, that folks who are listening who are queer know that you're amazing. And yeah. And so are you two. Good transition there. Thank you both so much for being on. It's been so wonderful getting to know you. And yeah, I can't wait to check out more of your stuff and read your book, Jamie. I'm excited. So thank you so much.
Thank you. No, thank you.
Thanks,
It's
DB.
been
Thank you
so lovely
much.
chatting, and thanks for having us on the podcast.
And please leave a review and rate it 5 stars and do all of the things that you do with good podcasts.
Listen, I'm not, I don't do that enough. Please listen. Yeah, I don't do that enough. So thank you to the YouTubers for keeping me humble. But yeah, seriously, rate this 5 stars, share it with a pal, give a review. It really helps. Jamie and Shaba, thanks so much.
Thanks, DB.
Thank you.
Our creator, host, and executive producer is me, Danielle Bezalel. Our producer and communications lead is Cathren Cohen. Our producer and communications coordinator is Sadie Lidji. Our marketing coordinator is Kate Fiala. Our music theme is by Hook Sounds. Thanks so much to our featured guests, partners, and listeners. Want to partner with us? Email us at sexedwithdb@gmail.com. For more sex ed content, follow us on Instagram at sexedwithdbpodcast and on TikTok at sexedwithdb. Want to rep us with some brand new Sex Ed with DB merch? Go to sexedwithdb.com/merch to check it out now. See you next time.